Hello, everybody. AJ the CEO here, and thank you so much for entering the media booth. And this is where we pretty much how I guess describe this podcast is if you were a part of my media ministry, and we need to have some talks about some other stuff that might be for training, mindset, and just typical stuff that most people don't want to talk about, but a lot of people have in their mind when it comes to church media ministry. And this one is one of those things that I've dealt with this personally, and I have a lot of people on our Facebook group who we've have dealt with this. We talk about this on our roundtables on typically every other Sunday. I missed this past Sunday, but that is churches abusing church privilege. Now, how do I define church privilege? That is, again, if y'all don't know, I'm a preacher's kid, been in church my entire life, and there are some things that churches have a mindset of that they just expect. Like, for example, um, religious organizations can be classified or typically are classified as a 501(c) so that they're not taxed by the government and other things like that. Now, there is a form that you actually have to fill out so that you're listed, but it's implied that churches are given that privilege even if they don't sign that form. So, people, how do I tie that to a church privilege? That's like when a church goes pays for something, they sometimes I've seen this happen. They'll go to a store and say, "Hey, this is with a church. This is for a church, so you don't charge us tax or something for that." Some people, some companies insist, "Okay, show us the form," or they look you up, and then if you don't see it, then you just get charged just like anything else. Also, typically churches. Now, again, I'm not no lawyer. Don't consider legal advice. Fine, I'm not a CPA or nothing like that, so be mindful of that. But typically churches don't have to do like taxes the way traditional businesses do and things like that. But another thing that church privilege has is that it's typically a volunteer army, meaning that the people that come to the church, for the majority, yeah, there may be some people on salary, maybe the ministerial staff, maybe an administrator, maybe musicians, sometimes maybe even a media director. They may get paid, but the vast majority don't get paid. You are thankful for their volunteering and helping out maintaining the ministry because you believe that it's like, hey, this is you're rendering this unto God and not to man and things like that. Understood. I've done that for years playing when I wasn't getting paid as a musician. But how I deem churches abusing this privilege is no one has to give you anything. None of your volunteers have to volunteer. It's one of the things we need to be mindful of, like from a media ministry standpoint. Most of my media ministry, if not all, are not paid. So I am very thankful and appreciative. And I try to do stuff for them to show my appreciation and gratitude because they don't have to do anything. And to get to the point where it's like the things that they don't have to do, I am now expecting or demanding them to do, that is abusing church privilege. You're leveraging somebody's unique mindset of I want to serve, and you're turning that into almost like an ultimatum or demands or even expectations. I know we want to set a bar at this level. Like me, I want my media ministry to run like this. I want it to be a well-oiled machine. I want it to do all that. But again, these are not my employees. I can't tell them or demand them do anything. Just like with choir, I have had the same thing. I don't choir members were not paid. Most of the time, some of the musicians were not paid. They were gone under honorarium. Other times, musicians are being paid, but typically, I have not experienced what the choir members are paid. So, to demand they do certain stuff is not realistic. You can't swing church as a bat to demand people to do stuff. Now, the other reason I started off with business, because that's a lot where this is coming from, and I run multiple businesses. I deal primarily with churches, And the other church abuse I've seen churches asking for a hookup, not paying stuff on time, thinking that they shouldn't have. Like, why are you? I mean, literally, I've had and heard of churches. I'm hemming and hawing because I'm trying to convey this properly. I've had a lot of companies say that they just don't want to deal with churches because churches have abused their privileges. They don't want to pay on time. They they always want to change the rules after stuff has already been done. It's a bad stigma, unfortunately, with churches when it comes to um, their mindset of how they conduct business, how they act, and that's outside of the building and inside of the building. I talked about again originally how they are treating their people, and that's one thing that I always talk about. That let's just call it what it is. A lot of people, the world, consider Christians a bunch of hypocrites. And I can't knock them for that because of how, unfortunately, a lot of us act. Um, when it comes to a business standpoint or just dealing with people, what do you think people think when the church can't pay their bills on time? The church pays their bills late. They just drag stuff out, don't answer the phone when money is owed or when creditors are calling and stuff like that. Or they just run people dry who work. People that put in, like, again, I'm not suggesting that churches need to give them, benefits and all this other stuff like an employee. That's not it. You can pay anybody multiple millions of dollars. And there are people who get paid millions of dollars in their jobs and they still quit. Why do they quit? Because they're unsatisfied, how they're being treated, how they're being talked to, they're not being appreciated. Contrary to popular belief, most people leave because of that. It's not about money. Because if it was, people who were getting paid tons and tons and tons and tons of money wouldn't, from a certain position, would never leave. But all of us know of people who've been making good money, but they left. So it's not about the money. It's about how we treat people. And then, especially as a church, we're supposed to be mimicking Christ-like behavior here. And it says, I mean, in the word, it even says that render unto Caesar, Caesar, render unto God's what's God's. So when we're not of this world, we're in this world, but not of this world. And we have to play while we're in this sand pit that sometimes does not own, we do not own. We have to play by those rules. So if you have an internet bill, you have contractor bills, you have electrical bills, whatever it is, pay them on time. Like, why would you want to add something to a stigma that everybody already thinks that we're hypocrites? Why would we continue to do activities that contribute to why people view us that way? And then more importantly, now let's go inside the house. No one has to do anything. So when you have people that want to do something, celebrate, honor, appreciate them. I'm not saying, roll out a red carpet, but at the same time, I'm saying don't turn them into a red carpet. If you got people who are always there every Sunday, Saturday, whatever day their service, doing stuff throughout the week, helping out here, there, and there, it is very dangerous to get to a point where we're so thankful for what people do, and it comes from thankfulness to expectation, where I don't appreciate what you're doing anymore. I'm expecting you to do that. Like, oh, we pay a musician. Now, I got to be careful how I say this. If you have somebody in the church, if you're an employee to where you're being paid, yeah, you do have an expectation because you are hired. Like when I was hired as the musician and the choir director, I was expected to be there on time, to be prepared, to have the music taught, to instruct. That was my job. So that's different for expectations. I'm talking about the people who volunteer and you have expectations on them as if they have a quarterly review and you want to, micromanage them and tell them, how come you haven't finished this on time, blah, blah, blah. No. That does not work like that. That's the quickest way for you to get somebody to walk out and not deal with you. So again, this is more stuff about leadership. We have to be careful that I was reading a book and it says everybody is an egotist. And it's not a bad thing, but you got to realize that it's about building up each other and telling them and encouraging people. Because it's like if I see somebody that's busting their butt and they're not getting paid for what they're doing, why in the world would I come behind them and be like, "How come you weren't here? You're late. You did it." No, no. I'm just thankful that you're here because it could have been, and I've done this before, where it was just me running everything. So I'm very much thankful when I have other people working, like John, Sister Alicia, and other people that are in my current media ministry. I'm beyond thankful for their that they're there in times I've left and I've had to do stuff for business or go out of town, and they've held it down, and I am very thankful for that. I'm not sitting there like, why are you not here? Why? No, no, no. And we got to be careful of that to where if we want to have this community where people want to come in, we can't sit here and demand people to act a certain way as if I'm their boss and they're your employees. And we also need to represent Christ in the earth realm, meaning that we need to be the best patrons, clients that any company has ever had. Not about taking your sweet time to pay bills on time, defaulting on stuff, changing stuff, being troubled businesses. Because guess what? When you do stuff when your ministry does stuff like that, you put a bad stigma on other ministries. So when another that same company that had a deal with you goes to another ministry, now they have these preconceived notions. Are y'all going to be just like another one of these churches that we don't want to deal with? And let me give you an inside scoop. Most of the companies who deal with churches because they've had a issue, that's why they railroad you. Because they're like, oh, we know you're going to get over on it. You're going to try to get over on us. So let's jack the price up 3 times higher so that when you don't pay everything, we've already gotten what we need out of this project. I've had so many times installs that I normally do personally. I've come behind and found out that a company was offering the same thing and they were charging 5 times more than what I was. And they were using less quality stuff than what I use. Why do stuff like that? Sometimes they're bad companies that just want to get people like that. But then there are other times that they've had a very bad stigma with certain churches in ministries as a whole. So it's two-sided. Don't just think that you're a church, that you're God's gift to man and you can act any type of way that you want. That's not it. Also, don't think that because you're a church and you have people in your church working that you can treat them any type of way that you want. Just be very mindful of that. That's why I always say at the end of my live streams, I want to thank and tell everybody who's associated with media ministry that I'm very thankful for what they're doing, even if I'm not in their media ministry, because they don't have to do. No one has to watch my channel. No one has to come to my Q&As. So I appreciate that. And more importantly, no one has to continue to educate themselves. They don't have to. But the fact that they do, I'm appreciative of that. And now those are things that, especially if you're not in media ministry and you're watching my channel, if you're a pastor or you're a laity or whatever that's in church, man, go ahead and give it up for your people who have been holding it down since the pandemic started, who are constantly doing stuff to help your ministry move forward. Because they don't have to do that. And if they didn't do that, where would you be? So again, folks, be careful about abusing the privileges and rights that we have. They're awesome that we have it, that God has given that stuff to us, but it's a very slippery slope to where instead of being appreciative of what we have, we start expecting and demanding those things as if we're entitled. No one is entitled to give you anything. So that's inside the church and outside of the church. So let me know what y'all think about that. Have you experienced any stuff like that where you feel like churches abusing the privileges that they have? Maybe there's other things I didn't talk about. Let me know down below so we can keep this conversation going, because this podcast is meant to talk about the things that a lot of us have and we have in our minds. And I know they're there because we talk about them on our roundtable, but they're not being talked about enough. And this is how we move forward. We don't just hide and put issues up under the rug and think things are going to get better. We need to talk about them, bring a light to them, put a spotlight on them so we can examine them, look at them, reevaluate them, and then completely get rid of them so that we can move forward. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll be catching y'all on the next Media Booth, folks. Later.